It is a tremendous privilege to be able to call on our Director of Congregational Learning in her 27th year serving this congregation to offer us the sermon for this morning. Lori Sagarin.
As I began to write this sermon, I imagined how it would feel to stand before all of you in this sanctuary of our creation, sharing these words on Rosh Hashanah morning. Nothing could have prepared me for the overwhelming sense of joy I feel at seeing most of your faces and feeling a sense of community. I struggled this year more than in years past with the words I hope to share this morning. I feel a sense of responsibility whenever I stand before you, and this year I feel it even more acutely. I feel a sense of urgency to share words that will inspire, allow for reflection, and hit the perfect note. I feel compelled to help our community to move forward and to celebrate our resilience in the face of unprecedented trauma. I don't want to talk about COVID. I'm done with COVID. Not as a disease. I know it's still out there, but as a mindset. I am done with us as communal beings being forced to stifle and ignore our social instincts. I'm done with living in fear. I'm done with living a remote life. This morning is a celebration. It is a celebration of our new year, and it is a celebration of our renewal as a TBI community as we come out of darkness and into the light. And personally, it's a huge celebration for me to have all three of my children here this morning. And so, as is my way, I will begin with a story. A hopeful story. There was a town where one day all of the clocks stopped working. Despite the people's best efforts, they could not get them to start again. Though many in the village were handy, there wasn't anyone who understood the inner workings of the apparatus, the springs and dials, the gears and pendulum. This village was quite secluded. Years passed until a wanderer who entered the village was discovered to be a watchmaker. Quickly, the town was abuzz, each bringing him their own clocks in the hope that this stranger could fix them. One after another lined up, praying that their most important family heirlooms could be returned to working order. But soon, each of the villagers was disappointed. After many long winters and wet summers, their clocks were too rusted to salvage. Yet among all the heartache and sadness, there was one person who did get good news. The watchmaker could fix his clock. Soon everyone was gathered around this lucky time teller, asking his secret. Why could the watchmaker salvage his clock and no other? When our clock stopped, he said, I didn't know what else to do, so I kept winding my clock each morning as if it worked. And that simple act of hope had kept it from rusting over. Hope is precisely what we need in the darkest of times. As it was for the townspeople, despair is the pathway to ruin. When we give up hope, we allow our hearts to rust over. But when we keep hope alive, when we wind our clocks expectantly, we make possible the future for which we yearn. Like the person who kept winding the clock, holding out hope, even when there was none, we in this community lived in hope. Our winding was online worship, outdoor programs, and a drive-in Hanukkah celebration. We held on to hope that we would one day all return to normal. But what exactly is hope? It's not exactly optimism, which is the belief that everything will turn out fine. And it's not confidence, which is a certainty that you can achieve what you seek. No, hope is much more elusive. Hope is the belief that through our efforts, we might get closer and even reach our goals. Rabbi Michael Marmer wrote, "Optimism is passive, hope is active. Unlike optimism and pessimism, which are qualities we are often born with, hope is something we can embrace. While optimism is a matter of personality or disposition, hope is a matter of faith." As it's surprising as it might sound, many great thinkers throughout history have not embraced the idea of hope. In his history of the Peloponnesian War, Thucydides scoffed at those with hope. One could look at the future expectantly, but all of the hope in the world will not help them when the armies appear at their doorstep. He feared that hope would delay action, and in his world, action is what mattered most. Likewise, Seneca and his fellow Stoic philosophers dismissed hope. For them, a person's chief task is to learn to live in the present. Hope may seem useful, but it teaches us to look to the future. And when we begin to leave the present, we open the door for less helpful, future-dependent emotional outlooks like fear and anxiety. If I hope for an outcome, I will also fear not achieving it. As he wrote, "Wildly different though they are, hope and fear, they march in unison like a prisoner and the escort he is handcuffed to." Yet, Jewish history has proven that hope is indispensable to our lives, and we knew this early on. We are a religion built on the idea of hope. Our ancestors are paragons of hope in their personal struggles. Our Bible is filled with stories of women who are too old to have children, holding on to the dream of motherhood and finding it. It contains stories of lovers searching for companions and one day achieving it. It contains the story of King Hezekiah, who the Bible tells us was sick and one day received word that he was going to die. Unwilling to accept his decree, he turned his face towards the wall and prayed with fervor to be revived. God heard his prayer, and because Hezekiah had not given up hope, added more than a decade to his life. Yet as inspiring as these stories may be, it is in our story that the power of hope truly shines through. Jewish history is not an easy one. We faced enemies stronger than us who seek our destruction. We have lived in exile for 2,000 years away from our homeland. We have gained and lost power, attained agency, and watched it disappear. In each of these moments, it has been our communal hope that kept us alive. There is little wonder then that when Israel became a state and they sought out a national anthem, they chose to call it Hatikva, the hope. We are a people whose great heroes are not warriors, but prophets who strike a balance between words of rebuke and messages of hope and comfort. After the first temple is destroyed, they warn against despair, build houses, plant vineyards, live in the present while working for the future. And in every generation, this message of hope rings out. It was these messages that inspired the early reformers to build a new American Judaism, inspired by the words of the prophets and built on our communal obligation to leave the world better than we found it. It was, in fact, these messages that first attracted me to this movement. A child of the 60s and 70s, my Jewish education was built on Hebrew memorization and the Holocaust. It was not a bad education. In fact, it was the place where I found solace and identity. But I can honestly say there was not a lot in that educational framework that was hopeful. The Judaism I knew was built on obligation, devotion, and a little bit of guilt. When I got to college and met a lot of Reformed Jews, I was drawn to the optimism, the sense of duty to repair the world, and the hopeful belief that we could in fact affect change through our commitment to action. Though important, hope is not easy. It takes courage to hope. True courage is not running into a battle knowing the outcome. It is entering a struggle knowing that you could fail, but doing it anyway. Seneca was right. It's a scary thing to hope because there's a good chance you will be disappointed. Early on, with plenty of time before us, it seems our hope is infinite. But when time passes and we have not come closer to our dreams, it's much easier to give up. Just because hope takes fortitude and bravery doesn't mean we should avoid it. As psychologist Brené Brown teaches, you can choose courage and you can choose comfort, but you cannot choose both. Knowing you have helped to build the future you have hoped for makes it all the more meaningful when you do. One of my favorite Jewish folktales is that of Choni the Wise One, who was also known as Choni the Circle Maker. By drawing a circle and stepping inside of it, he would recite special prayers for rain, sometimes even arguing with God during a drought, and the rains would come. He was indeed a miracle maker. As wise as he was, though, Choni sometimes saw something that puzzled him. Then he would ask questions so he could unravel the mystery. One day, Choni the circle maker was walking on the road and saw a man planting a carob tree. Choni asked the man, "How long will it take for this tree to bear fruit?" The man replied, 70 years. Choni then asked the man, "And do you think you will live another 70 years and eat the fruit of this tree?" The man answered, "Perhaps not. However, when I was born into this world, I found many carob trees planted by my father and my grandfather. Just as they planted trees for me, I am planting trees for my children and grandchildren, so they will be able to eat the fruit from these trees." This story has always resonated, and to me, Choni the Wise may have had a few things on Seneca and the other great philosophers. He would ask and would learn, and in this case, I like to think, gave us, many, many generations later, a unique understanding of hope. Even if we fall short, even if we never reach our dream, hope still matters. In other words, hope doesn't just sustain our dreams, it keeps us healthy, body and soul. For these reasons, among others, our ancient rabbis understood the true risks of turning towards despair. For them, despair was actually a legal category called yeush, and it was an important linchpin in civil law. The Torah teaches that when one finds a lost object, it is our obligation to return it to the owner. If we fail to do this, if we pocket it rather than bring it back, we are liable for stealing. Yet, not every item can be returned. Some don't have an identifying mark. Up to this point, all of this makes sense. But the revolution of Jewish law is that if one finds a lost object, he cannot keep an item unless the owner has given up hope of getting it back, unless the owner has been through this process of yeush, unless he has resigned himself to a life without his wallet or hat or backpack. It is not yours to take. Jewish legal codes are filled with the parameters of this problematic law. How can we tell if someone has given up hope? What if we know that they will in the future? Can we hold on to the object while we wait for them to despair? What is important is not the specifics of the law, but the overarching message. When we give up hope, when we despair, we relinquish agency and control to that which is most important to us. Without hope, others get the things, live the life, make the choices that should have been ours. If we give up our vision for the future, others might have the right to forge the path without us. I was once having a conversation with one of our more observant teachers about this exact idea. She relayed to me a story that when she was single and traveling in Israel, she ended up in Mea Shearim, the most ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem, at the home of a Rebbitzin. She was there because she wanted to find a prayer that she could say that would help her find love. Needless to say, she was completely surprised when she was given a slip of paper that said nothing of husbands and families. Instead, she was instructed to offer a prayer for finding a lost object. This prayer helped her keep her hope alive. It reminded her that the thing that was most important to her at that moment was not gone. And if she held out hope, if she resisted that urge of Yeush, if she avoided despair, she might still find love. And she did. If these days are dark for you, your light is not gone. Instead, you have simply misplaced it. Have hope you will find it again. You are not alone in this sense of Yeush. It is sadly a feeling shared by many, and it takes everything in us to resist. On this Rosh Hashanah, I'm thinking of the mystical notion of the lost light of the universe. According to legend, when God created the world, God created a special kind of light. This was the light that God spoke into being when God said, as we will read tomorrow morning, Vayehi or, let there be light. But this light is not the same light we see today. It is not the sun, the moon, or the stars. Those primordial beams were too powerful and dangerous, and after Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, God hid it away from us, and we all lost the light. Our goal, through acts of love and faith, is to uncover the Or Ein Sof, humanity's unending light, which will shine forth for us. Though the world may seem chaotic and bleak, as long as we hold out hope that we will once again bask in this divine light, we will someday find it. It is only when we stop the search that the light disappears. It is only when we give up hope. We are clockwinders, defiantly ignoring the urge to stop. We are searchers, unable to give up the hope of finding that which seems lost to us. We are pioneers, making a path toward light in a dark and unsteady world. Alfred Tennyson wrote, "Hope smiles from the threshold of the year to come, whispering, it will be happier." Whatever the last few years have brought you, let hope in. Let it wash away any semblance of despair. When life seems overwhelming, when you feel out of control, there is one thing that no one can take from you: your stubborn, audacious, courageous, and resilient hope. This, my friends, the promise of hope, is what will guide us, like a spiritual torch from the darkness of the last 2.5 years and into the light of the future. And who knows, if we all walk together, we may find our way to the Or Ein Sof, the never-ending light. I'm in, and I hope you are too. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzer or uvorech osher, oseh shalom uvoreh et hakol.